Admiral Jack Morrison stood at the wide windows of his command ship, watching the stars bend and twist as they dropped out of hyperspace. The massive fleet behind him followed like a pack of hungry wolves, their engines glowing blue in the darkness of space. 3 years had passed since the day that changed everything. 3 years since the Xanthari Empire turned 12 human colonies into burning graves. He could still hear the screams from the video messages that reached Earth, families begging for help that never came, children crying as alien ships rained fire from the sky. The Xanthari had not just killed them, they had taken the survivors as slaves, treating humans like animals to be bought and sold. "Admiral, we're in position," said Commander Lisa Brooks from her station behind him. Her voice was steady, but Morrison could hear the anger underneath. Lisa had lost her brother on New Austin, one of the first colonies to fall. Every person on this ship had lost someone. Morrison turned from the window and looked at the bridge around him. The Retribution was the largest ship humans had ever built, but it was just one of 847 vessels in their fleet. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and the two massive dreadnoughts Vengeance and Righteous Fury filled the space around them. Each ship carried the best weapons and technology humanity could create. "Send word to all ships," Morrison said. "We begin Operation Justice in 30 minutes. Every captain knows their job. We hit them hard, we hit them fast, and we make sure they remember what happens when you hurt our people." On the bridge of the science ship Discovery, Dr. Helen Carter checked her instruments one last time. The readings showed exactly what she hoped to see. The new weapons were working perfectly. For 3 years, human scientists had studied every piece of Xanthari technology they could find. They had taken apart crashed ships, examined captured weapons, and learned how their enemies thought. But humans did not just copy what they found, they made it better. Where the Xanthari built their shields to stop known weapons, humans built shields that learned and changed. Where the Xanthari made their ships fast, humans made theirs invisible. Where the Xanthari created powerful guns, humans created weapons that could crack planets in half. "Dr. Carter," said her assistant, pointing at his screen, "the quantum signatures are stable. All our new tech is ready to go." Carter smiled for the first time in months. "Good. Let's show these aliens what happens when they mess with the wrong species." Far away on the Xanthari homeworld of Kethvar, Emperor Vexthul sat on his crystal throne, reading reports with growing amusement. The pathetic humans had finally gathered enough courage to leave their little corner of space. His spies told him they were coming with less than 1,000 ships. It was almost insulting. "General Cordon," the Emperor called to his military commander, "how many ships do we have ready to defend our space?" The general, a tall creature with 4 arms and scales that changed color with his mood, bowed low. 200 warships, my Emperor, plus 50 orbital defense platforms. Our weapons are twice as powerful as anything the humans possess. This will be over quickly." Emperor Vexthul laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Excellent. When we destroy their fleet, we will take the survivors back to their home planet and show them what real power looks like. Perhaps we will turn Earth into our new slave world." The Emperor had ruled the Xanthari Empire for 60 years. In that time, he had conquered 47 different species. Some fought bravely, others surrendered quickly, but all of them eventually knelt before Xanthari power. Humans would be no different. They were young, weak, and had only recently learned to travel between stars. The Emperor expected this war to last maybe a few days. Captain Ryan Stone crouched in the small cockpit of his scout ship, watching the Xanthari fleet move into position through his long-range sensors. The enemy ships were big and looked dangerous, covered in weapons and thick armor. But Stone had been studying these ships for 3 years. He knew their weak spots better than their own crews did. "Scout leader to Admiral Morrison," he whispered into his radio. "Enemy fleet is moving to intercept. They're not even trying to hide. Looks like they think this will be easy." Morrison's voice came back calm and cold. "Copy that, Ryan. Keep watching. And stay hidden. When this starts, I want you to record everything. The whole galaxy needs to see what happens to species that commit genocide." Stone adjusted his ship's cloak and settled in to wait. His ship was completely invisible to Xanthari sensors, using technology they had never seen before. The aliens had no idea that human scouts had been watching their empire for months, mapping their defenses and learning their secrets. Back on the Retribution, Morrison walked between the bridge stations, checking on his crew. These men and women had trained for this moment since the day they learned about the colony attacks. They had pushed themselves harder than any human military in history. They had studied, practiced, and prepared for war against an enemy that thought it was superior in every way. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Commander Amy Rodriguez from the weapons station, "all ships report ready. The new adaptive shields are online. Stealth squadrons are in position. Planet crackers are armed and ready." Morrison nodded. The planet crackers were humanity's most terrible weapon. They were not meant to just destroy enemy ships. They were designed to split worlds apart, to turn entire planets into asteroid fields. The Zenthari had used similar weapons on human colonies. Now they would learn how it felt to be on the receiving end. "Communications, open a channel to the Zenthari fleet," Morrison ordered. A moment later, the ugly face of General Cordon appeared on the main screen. The alien scales were bright red, showing his confidence and anger. "Human Admiral," the general said in broken English, "you have made a mistake coming here. Surrender now, and we will kill you quickly. Continue this foolishness, and we will make you suffer like your colonists did." Morrison looked at the alien for a long moment, then smiled coldly. "General, you seem to think this is going to be a battle. You're wrong. This is an execution. We came here to make sure your entire empire pays for what you did to our people. When we're done, every species in the galaxy will know what happens when you commit genocide against humanity." The general laughed. "Brave words from a dying species. We outnumber you. Our ships are stronger, our weapons are more powerful. What could you possibly do to threaten the mighty Zenthari Empire?" Morrison's smile grew wider. "You're about to find out. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. Operation Justice is now active. Show them what humans can do when we're angry." The space around the Zenthari fleet suddenly filled with human ships as cloaking devices shut off. What the aliens thought was a fleet of 847 ships was actually much larger. Hidden stealth vessels appeared everywhere, surrounding the enemy formation completely. On Kethvar, Emperor Vexthul stood up from his throne as reports flooded in. "How many ships do they have?" he shouted. "We're not sure, my Emperor," stammered a communications officer. "Our sensors are being jammed. We count at least 1,500 vessels, but there could be more." For the first time in 60 years, Emperor Vexthul felt something he had almost forgotten. Fear. The first shots of the battle lit up space like angry stars. Red beams from Zenthari weapons crashed against the hulls of human ships, but something was wrong. The energy blasts that should have torn through metal and killed hundreds of humans simply bounced off like raindrops on glass. General Cordon watched from his command center, his scales turning from confident red to worried yellow. "What is happening? Our weapons are not working." "Sir," called out one of his officers, "the human ships have some kind of new shielding. Our energy weapons are being absorbed or redirected." On the human ship Defiance, Commander Amy Rodriguez smiled as she watched her adaptive shields do exactly what they were designed to do. For 3 years, human scientists had studied every Zenthari weapon they could find. They learned how the aliens made their energy beams, how hot they burned, and what frequency they used. Then they built shields that could learn and adapt in real time. "First wave working perfectly," she reported to Admiral Morrison. "Their weapons can't touch us. Beginning counterattack now." The human fleet moved forward, like a wall of death. Blue plasma beams reached out from human ships, striking Zenthari vessels with terrible accuracy. But these were not the same weak weapons the aliens remembered from 3 years ago. Human engineers had improved everything, making their guns faster, stronger, and deadlier. Zenthari ships began to explode one by one. Their thick armor, which had protected them against dozens of other species, cracked and melted under the improved human weapons. Escape pods launched from dying ships as alien crews fled for their lives. Emperor Vexthul grabbed his communication device. "All ships, Fall back to defensive positions around the orbital platforms. Use the planet's gravity to help our weapons. But as the Zenthari fleet pulled back, something impossible happened. Ships began appearing out of nowhere behind them. Captain Ben Hayes, commanding the stealth destroyer Shadow, led 50 invisible ships that had been waiting for exactly this moment. "Surprise," Hayes said into his radio as his ship dropped its cloak right behind a Zenthari cruiser. The human, stealth ships carried humanity's most terrible weapons, the ones they called planet crackers. These were not meant to just destroy ships. They were designed to split entire worlds in half. The first planet cracker fired, and the Zenthari cruiser simply disappeared. Not destroyed, not exploded, but completely erased from existence. The weapon tore apart every atom in the ship, leaving nothing but empty space where 1,000 aliens had been breathing just seconds before. "What was that?" screamed General Cordon as he watched ship after ship vanish from his screens. "What kind of weapon can do that?" Dr. Helen Carter monitored the battle from her science ship, recording everything. The readings on her instruments showed levels of destruction she had only seen in computer models. The planet crackers were working even better than expected. Each shot removed a Zenthari ship from reality itself. "This is incredible," she whispered to her assistant. "The quantum disruption weapons are tearing apart their molecular structure. They're not just dying, they're being unmade." But the humans were not finished. As the Zenthari fleet fell back toward their orbital defense platforms, more surprises waited for them. The platforms were huge structures, each one the size of a small moon, covered with massive guns that could destroy entire fleets. The aliens thought they would be safe behind these defenses. They were wrong. Captain Lisa Stone, commanding the assault ship Thunder, led a squadron of boarding vessels straight at the nearest platform. Zenthari gunners fired everything they had, filling space with deadly energy beams. But the human ships moved through the weapons fire like ghosts, their adaptive shields turning the alien guns into harmless light shows. "Boarding parties away," Stone announced as dozens of small human ships latched onto the platform's hull. Within minutes, human Marines were cutting their way inside, carrying weapons the Zenthari had never seen before. Colonel Kate Phillips kicked down the door to the platform's control room, her powered armor making her look like a metal giant. The Zenthari soldiers inside pointed their weapons at her and fired, but the energy beams bounced off her suit like toys. "Your turn," she said, raising her plasma rifle. The weapon fired once, and every alien in the room fell down. Not dead, but unconscious. Human weapons could be set to stun, something Zenthari technology had never bothered with. Within an hour, Phillips and her Marines had captured the entire platform. They did the same to 5 more platforms, turning the Zenthari's own defenses against them. The massive guns that were supposed to protect the homeworld now pointed at the remaining alien ships. On Kethvar, Emperor Vexthul watched his fleet die on the viewing screens. Ship after ship disappeared under human weapons. His orbital platforms, built over decades and thought to be unbeatable, were now controlled by human soldiers. "How is this possible?" he asked nobody in particular. 3 years ago, they were primitives. They barely had ships that could leave their own solar system. How did they become so powerful? His question was answered when Admiral Morrison's face appeared on every screen in the Imperial Palace. The human looked tired but determined, like a man who had carried a heavy weight for too long and was finally ready to put it down. "Emperor Vexthul," Morrison said, his voice calm and cold. 3 years ago, you made a mistake. You thought humans were weak because we were young. You thought we would be easy to conquer because we had not fought a galactic war before. You were wrong about everything. The Emperor's scales turned pure white with fear. "What do you want?" "Justice," Morrison replied. "When you destroyed our colonies, you killed 12 million innocent people. Men, women, children, babies who had never hurt anyone. You turned our people into slaves and laughed about it. You made humanity your enemy, and that was the biggest mistake your species ever made." On the human flagship, Morrison turned to his tactical officer. "Lieutenant Commander Parker, status report." Steve Parker looked up from his control station. "Zenthari fleet is down to 67 ships. All orbital platforms are under our control, Enemy ground forces are requesting permission to surrender. Morrison nodded. Tell them surrender is not an option. They did not offer surrender to our colonies. Begin Phase 2 of the operation. Across the Xanthari fleet, alien captains watched in horror as human ships began to do impossible things. Some vessels seemed to bend space around them, moving in ways that violated the laws of physics. Others split into multiple copies of themselves, confusing targeting systems and making it impossible to know which ships were real. Commander Rodriguez activated her ship's experimental drive system, and the Defiant suddenly appeared in 3 different places at once. Xanthari gunners did not know which target to shoot at, and by the time they figured it out, all 3 versions of the ship were firing at them. This is not possible, whispered General Cordon as he watched human technology that seemed like magic. No species can advance this quickly. It takes thousands of years to develop such weapons. But humans were not like other species. When they were pushed to the edge of extinction, they did not give up or surrender. They evolved. They learned. They became something new and terrible. Dr. Carter's instruments showed that Xanthari morale was collapsing. Radio communications between enemy ships revealed panic, confusion, and growing terror. These aliens had thought they were the greatest predators in the galaxy. Now they were learning what it felt like to be prey. The battle was no longer a battle. It had become a demonstration of power, a lesson that would be remembered across the galaxy for 1,000 years. Humanity had come to collect a debt, and they would not leave until it was paid in full. Admiral Morrison stood before the main communication array on his flagship, knowing that every Xanthari in the Empire was about to hear his words. The battle above their homeworld was almost over, but the real message was just beginning. People of the Xanthari Empire, Morrison said, his voice carrying across space to billions of alien ears. 3 years ago, your leaders made a choice. They chose to murder innocent families on 12 human colonies. They chose to take our people as slaves. They chose to laugh while children begged for mercy. On Kethvar, Emperor Vexthul watched from his palace as the last few ships of his once mighty fleet tried desperately to escape. Human vessels chased them down one by one, their advanced engines making escape impossible. The Emperor's hand shook as he realized his empire was ending. Today you learn the price of genocide, Morrison continued. We did not come here to conquer your people. We came to deliver justice. Every world that helped in the attack on our colonies will face the same fate our people faced. But unlike your leaders, we do not wage war on innocent civilians. Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker coordinated the attack on 17 different Xanthari military worlds. His ships appeared out of hyperspace with perfect timing, surrounding each planet before the defenders could react. But the humans did something that shocked every alien observer. They targeted only military bases, government buildings, and weapon factories. They left hospitals, schools, and civilian homes completely untouched. On the industrial world of Tethmar, Captain Rachel Ford led her intelligence team in capturing the planet's defense network. Her soldiers moved through the military command center like ghosts, their advanced armor making them nearly invisible. Xanthari officers tried to fight back, but human weapons simply put them to sleep instead of killing them. Target acquired, Ford reported as her team reached the main computer core, downloading all military records and communication logs. We'll know every secret the Xanthari military ever had. Within hours, Ford's team had broken into every classified database in the Empire. They found records of other species the Xanthari had destroyed, proof of slave markets, and evidence of planned attacks on dozens more worlds. The Empire had been planning to wipe out half the galaxy, but they also found something else. Secret messages between Xanthari leaders showing that many of them had argued against attacking the human colonies. Some had warned that humans might be more dangerous than they appeared. These voices had been ignored by the Emperor and his war council. Dr. Helen Carter studied the psychological profiles of Xanthari soldiers as they surrendered across 17 worlds. Her instruments showed something she had never seen before. These aliens, who had conquered 47 different species, were experiencing fear for the first time in their lives. It's fascinating, she told her assistant. For 60 years, they believed they were the strongest predators in the galaxy, Now they're discovering they might actually be prey. Their entire worldview is collapsing. On the battle-damaged bridge of his flagship, General Cordan made one final attempt to rally his forces. The few ships that remained tried to form a defensive line around the Imperial Palace, but human vessels moved around them like they were standing still. All units defend the Emperor, Cordan ordered. Show these humans that Zenthari warriors do not surrender. Major Tony Clark, leading the assault on the palace, heard the transmission and smiled inside his helmet. His Marines had been training for this moment for 3 years. They had studied Zenthari fighting techniques, learned their weaknesses, and prepared for every possible defense. The palace guards fired their weapons as human soldiers approached, but the energy beams bounced harmlessly off advanced armor. Clark's team moved through the defensive lines like they were not even there, stunning guards and capturing positions with frightening efficiency. Resistance is minimal, Clark reported to Admiral Morrison. These soldiers have never fought an enemy that could actually hurt them. They don't know how to handle being outmatched. Emperor Vexthul sat on his crystal throne, watching through the palace security cameras as human soldiers moved closer to his throne room. He had spent 60 years believing his empire was invincible. Now that belief was crashing down around him like broken glass. "My emperor," said his personal guard captain, "we must evacuate. There is still time to escape to the outer worlds." Vexthul shook his head slowly. "No. Look at them. They move through our defenses like we are children playing war games. Where could we run that they could not follow?" The throne room doors exploded inward, and Major Clark stepped through the smoke with his team behind him. The Emperor expected to be killed immediately, but the human simply pointed a weapon at him and spoke in perfect Zenthari language. "Emperor Vexthul, you are under arrest for crimes against humanity and genocide against 12 human colonies. You will be taken alive to stand trial." The Emperor stared at the human in shock. "You speak our language? We learned everything about your people," Clark replied. "Your language, your culture, your military tactics, your technology. We spent 3 years studying you while you forgot we existed. That was your second mistake." "What was our first mistake?" the Emperor asked. Clark's voice was cold as space. "You made humanity angry." Across the Empire, similar scenes played out on world after world. Human forces captured military leaders, downloaded classified information, and destroyed weapons that could threaten other species. But they did something that amazed every observer. They immediately began providing medical aid and food to civilian populations. Captain Ben Hayes, who had led the stealth attack during the battle, now commanded humanitarian efforts on 3 different worlds. His ships carried doctors, engineers, and supplies to help rebuild the damage caused by the fighting. "This doesn't make sense," said a captured Zenthari officer as he watched human medics treating wounded alien soldiers. "Why are you helping us? We are your enemies." Hayes looked at the alien with something like pity. "That's the difference between us and you. We fight to protect innocent people, not to hurt them. When the fighting stops, the healing begins." But the most shocking moment came when Admiral Morrison addressed the Galactic Council, the organization that governed relationships between different species. Representatives from hundreds of worlds watched as Morrison presented evidence of Zenthari crimes. The Zenthari Empire has committed genocide against not just humanity, but 17 other species over the past century, Morrison announced. "We have the proof. We have their own records. They plan to destroy half the galaxy." The council chamber fell silent as Morrison showed video evidence of Zenthari slave markets, records of planned exterminations, and communications between Empire leaders discussing which species to wipe out next. "Humanity offers a choice to the galaxy," Morrison continued. "Join us in building a new order where the strong protect the weak, or step aside while we do it ourselves. The age of predator empires is over." On dozens of worlds, alien governments held emergency meetings as they realized the balance of galactic power had changed forever. Species that had feared Zenthari expansion for decades suddenly saw hope for the first time in generations. The Nexari Republic was the first to send a diplomatic message to the human fleet. "The Nexari people wish to establish formal relations with humanity. We offer our full support for your efforts to bring justice to the galaxy. Within hours, similar messages arrived from the Quellian Confederacy, the Eldorian Union, and 37 other governments. Species that had hidden in fear of Xanthari expansion now wanted to stand beside the humans who had ended that threat. Emperor Vexthul, now imprisoned aboard a human ship, watched through a small window as his empire crumbled. Not through conquest, but through choice. His own people were rising up against the military leaders who had brought this disaster on them. "How?" he whispered to his guard, Major Clark. "How did you become so powerful so quickly?" Clark looked at the broken emperor with something like sadness. "You never understood what you were fighting. You thought you were fighting a young species with primitive technology. You were actually fighting an idea. The idea that no innocent person should die for someone else's ambition. That idea made us stronger than any weapon." 6 months after the fall of the Xanthari Empire, Admiral Jack Morrison walked through the halls of what used to be the Imperial Palace on Kethvar. The crystal walls still sparkled with alien beauty, but now they reflected something different. Instead of the cold light of conquest, they showed the warm glow of hope. The palace had been transformed into the headquarters of the new Terran Federation, but Morrison had refused to sit on the Emperor's throne. Instead, he had it removed and replaced with a simple conference table where representatives from dozens of species could meet as equals. "Admiral," said Commander Lisa Brooks as she approached with a data pad. "The final surrender documents are ready for your signature. That makes it official. The Xanthari Empire no longer exists." Morrison took the pad and signed his name with a steady hand. 3 years of planning, months of fighting, and countless hours of rebuilding had led to this moment. The species that had terrorized the galaxy for 6 decades was now just a memory. But the humans had not destroyed the Xanthari people. In the months following the war, Captain Ryan Stone had led efforts to establish new governments on former Empire worlds. These new leaders were chosen by the people themselves, not appointed by distant emperors. For the first time in generations, ordinary Xanthari citizens had a voice in their own future. "The transition is going better than we hoped," Stone reported during the daily briefing. Former Empire worlds are forming their own democratic governments. Some are even asking to join the Federation as equal members. Dr. Helen Carter had spent the months after the war studying something she found even more fascinating than human technology. She was documenting how quickly former enemies could become allies when treated with respect and fairness. "It's remarkable," she told Morrison during one of their regular meetings. "Xanthari civilians who lived under military rule for their entire lives are adapting to freedom faster than anyone expected. They're natural learners, just like humans." The most dramatic change came from an unexpected source. General Cordon, the former military commander who had once laughed at human weakness, now worked alongside Major Tony Clark to train new peacekeeping forces. The alien general had seen what happened when military power was used to hurt innocent people instead of protecting them. "I spent 40 years believing that strength meant the ability to destroy your enemies," Cordon said during a joint training exercise. "Now I understand that real strength means having the power to destroy your enemies and choosing not to use it." Clark nodded as he watched former Xanthari soldiers learning to work with human peacekeepers. "That's the difference between a warrior and a bully. Warriors protect people who can't protect themselves. Bullies hurt people because they enjoy causing pain." The transformation was not limited to former Empire worlds. Across the galaxy, species that had lived in fear for decades were experiencing something they had almost forgotten: peace. The Nexari Republic expanded their trade routes for the first time in 50 years. The Quellian Confederacy began building new colonies in systems they had abandoned when the Xanthari threatened them. Captain Ben Hayes, now serving as humanity's chief diplomatic officer, found himself busier than he had ever been during the war. Every day brought new requests for meetings, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts. "We have 17 species asking to join the Federation," Hayes reported to Morrison. "Another 32 want formal alliance agreements, and the Corellian Empire wants to discuss a non-aggression treaty." Morrison smiled at that last part. The Corellians were almost as aggressive as the Xanthari had been, but they were smart enough to see which way the galactic winds were blowing. Better to make peace with humanity than risk sharing the Xanthari's fate. But the most important meeting took place in a small room aboard the medical ship Mercy. Former Emperor Vexthul, now just an old alien in simple clothes, sat across from Morrison for the first time since his capture. "You could have killed me," the former Emperor said quietly. "Your people would have cheered. My people would have understood. Why did you choose to let me live?" Morrison looked at the alien who had ordered the deaths of 12 million humans. 6 months ago, he would have been happy to watch this creature die. Now he felt something different. Not forgiveness, but understanding. "Because killing you would not bring back the people who died," Morrison replied. "But keeping you alive might prevent other people from making the same mistakes you made." Vexthul nodded slowly. "I have been reading about human history. Your species has made the same mistakes I made. You have had emperors and dictators who caused great suffering. But you learned from those mistakes. You became better. That's what intelligence really means," Morrison said. "Not the ability to build bigger weapons or conquer more worlds. It means the ability to learn from your mistakes and choose to be better tomorrow than you were yesterday." The former emperor was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked the question Morrison had been expecting. "What happens to me now?" "You'll stand trial for what you did," Morrison answered. "But it will be a fair trial with judges from many different species. If you're found guilty, you'll spend the rest of your life in prison. But it will be a clean prison with books to read and decent food to eat. We don't believe in torture or revenge." Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker had perhaps the most important job in the new galactic order. His intelligence teams were working to identify other potential threats before they could grow into galaxy-spanning empires. It was easier to prevent wars than to fight them. "We've identified 12 species with aggressive expansion policies," Parker reported, "but they're all small right now. A few diplomatic visits from our fleet should be enough to convince them to choose a different path." The message was simple but effective. Species across the galaxy now understood that humanity was watching, not as conquerors looking for new worlds to claim, but as guardians making sure that no one else would follow the Xanthari's example. Commander Amy Rodriguez had taken on a different role. Her ship, the Defiance, now carried teachers and doctors, instead of weapons. She spent her time visiting worlds that had been damaged by the former empire, helping them rebuild not just their cities, but their hope for the future. "Children who grew up in fear are learning to play again," she reported from a former slave world. "Adults who never had choices are learning to make decisions for themselves. It's slow work, but it's the most important work we've ever done." The galaxy was changing in ways no one had expected. Trade increased as species no longer feared their neighbors. Scientific cooperation led to new discoveries that benefited everyone. Art and culture flowed between worlds as people shared their stories and dreams. But perhaps the most important change was in humanity itself. The species that had started as victims of genocide had become the galaxy's protectors. They had learned that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when destruction was necessary and when mercy was more powerful. Admiral Morrison stood once again at the windows of his flagship, but now he was looking at something different. Instead of the fire of war, space was filled with the lights of peaceful ships carrying trade goods, diplomats, and families visiting distant relatives. "Status report," he said to his bridge crew. "All Federation patrols report normal activity," replied Captain Rachel Ford, now serving as his strategic coordinator. "No conflicts, no threats, no requests for military intervention." Morrison smiled. It was the kind of report he had dreamed of hearing for 3 years. "Good," he said. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear." Humanity had set out to deliver justice for genocide. In the end, they had delivered something much more valuable. They had given the galaxy peace and shown every species that strength without wisdom was just another form of weakness. The age of predator empires was over. The age of protective alliances had begun, and at the center of it all stood humanity, no longer the galaxy's victims, but its guardians.